It's a simpler way of saying what he's saying right now of the cards he's been dealt. Those counterfactuals, truth value of those counterfactuals, those hypotheticals, God didn't have anything to do with it. He's just doing the best he can. Doing the best he can with cards he's been dealt. That's what you're hearing right there. Same thing. Hasn't changed. God did the best he could. Given the cards he was dealt, he didn't use that terminology here, but that's what he's saying. It's not feasible. How is that not exactly what he said earlier about the card dealer? The circumstances available to God, in answering a question about evil, as a Molinist, says, well, look, God's got to play with the cards he's been dealt by middle knowledge. To which I go, then we need to be worshiping the card dealer because the card dealer is superior to God. Because the card dealer sovereignly determined what free creatures would do in any given circumstance. Either that, you have to say, well, nobody did that, which means now the very form of any possible world is determined by some it's fate. It's just fate. Here, the issue still remains the fact that Molinism is telling us that there are things that are true, not because God wills them to be true, and not evidently because these are necessary truths related to the very being of God. They just are true. And that God must deal with their truthfulness. But if you're going to promote a theory that says that God can only do certain things because something else exists, and the leading proponent of it is the one who says God has to deal with the cards he's been dealt, don't look at me and insult me by my going, who dealt him the cards? It's a valid question, and you have not answered it.
I want to talk about analogies real quick before we move on, because you said if God creates free creatures, that's the price he has to pay. And I can already see the other Calvinists and other people saying, you see, God has to pay a price. It's the same thing from the first clip where we keep hearing repeatedly.
You can take, it's very easy to take things out of context. I think that this card dealer analogy, which came about by an analogy that Craig was trying to use, has been brazenly taken out of context by Dr. White and by others. And of course, you can take anything anyone says out of context, but that's disingenuous. You have to go by what they actually mean.
Right. And that's what I was just about to say, is that, in fact, Dr. White says, Craig, he just wants to have his cake and eat it too.
I think where the Molinist is left trying to have his cake and eat it too.
I could just say, well, who would want cake if they couldn't eat it? The point of the analogy wasn't that you should have cake and not eat it. Exactly. The point of the analogy is that you're trying to have, like, you want to have a wife and a girlfriend on the side, that kind of thing.
Right, yeah.
And the point with the cards he was dealt analogy isn't that, oh, God just, since it was that way, God had to do it. No, God could have not created free creatures. He could have created a world full of perfect robot creatures that did exactly what he wanted to and bow down to him. But the point is that God wanted truly free creatures to, and in that type of world, it logically entails that God can't manipulate them into doing exactly what he wants because of what freedom means, right?
Right.
So it's taking what's meant by, and I've noticed this in almost every discussion I've had and give analogies. It's always the analogy. It's never the point of the analogy. Instead of actually getting to the issues, we sit there and argue about the examples, and I got to find a new example. So yeah, I thought that when you said that, I was like, okay, we got to go over this real quick, just for the people listening, because somebody will pull this out of context. So anyway.
I mean, the Molinist can't say to the Calvinist, look, I agree with you that if God saw that it was better to create the kind of world that you want, God would have created it. And that God would have just said, well, I don't know counterfactuals of creaturely freedom. They threaten my sovereignty, so I'm not going to touch them with a 10-foot pole. I'm just going to have counterfactuals of determinacy where I determine everything, and I even determine what non-existent creatures would do in such and such other circumstances. Just determine everything in my decree. And God could have done that if he wanted to. It's just that I think based on scripture that God didn't do that.
Right.